Any script that started glorious weather greeted the teams for the opening round of the British GT Championship can be thrown away. Welcome to a soggy Oulton Park for the opening round of British GT for 2024. The Oulton Park International Circuit has two one-hour races today. It is, as ever, a stellar lineup. It is a great circuit, and these weather conditions are going to be a real test. One race coming up at 10:50 this morning. It's going to be wet still for that, I fear. The forecast is that it should dry up for the afternoon race, which will be the other side of 4 o'clock. But even so, for this 15-minute warm-up, it is going to be a real challenge. Joe Osborne and David Addison are trackside. Bryn Lucas is down in the pit lane. And before things get noisy, Bryn has caught up with Matt Topham, who was also in strife in the practice session on Saturday morning. He can tell all about that. To Bryn Lucas.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for opening with that. So I'll come to Matt and talk to you about the incident you had a couple of days ago here. It's not the great prep for you, and you're looking out the garage here, and it's a bit wet as well, so not perfect for you at all as a team.
I couldn't hear a single word you just said, but yes, we had an incident on free practice 1. The team have worked tirelessly all yesterday, all that night. The car has moved, so I'm happy. We're going to see what we can do. We're obviously starting from the back. It's damp. Anything can happen. So. Last
season we saw you a couple of times out on track as well, so it's great to see you out here just testing the water with GT3. A full campaign, a full season. What is the total aspiration, ignoring the fact you're not starting where you want to start here today?
Yeah, I think between me and Josh, we've got the pace to be up there, fighting with even the Pro-Am teams. Obviously not ideal this weekend. We'll salvage what we can. If we can get the Silver Am Championship, that'll be mega. That's where the aim is, but anything, you know, I think we couldn't get better than that.
Well, as the cars are leaving the pit lane, a very quick word on your teammate Josh Rowledge. He made his debut in British GT last season after a really strong campaign the year before in Ginettas, so he's a very, very good driver, a young driver. How's the relationship working between the both of you?
I mean, I met Josh at Spa in the Artura Trophy race last year, and we wanted the same thing from that car, and it's been the same since we've tested this car. We want the same thing from it. We're getting on really well. We have a laugh, and then when we get in the car, it gets serious, and we're going to get the job done this season.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Matt Topham, who we saw doing great things a few years ago with Darren Turner in GT4, making that transition to GT3, as you've heard. Now, Joe, let's have a word about Oulton Park. We know it's a great, challenging circuit for the drivers. Then you put the rain on the surface. Now, what's it like?
Yeah, super tricky. The hardest single element of Oulton Park is the multi-surface of the lap. So historically, new tracks are all done with a surface at the start, and then it gets patchwork, and it is like a patchwork quilt here now. There's probably 13, 14 different surfaces out there, so the drivers now have to go and find that. In the dry, the surface difference can be like a couple of percent. In the wet, it feels like 50%. So they've got to go and find where these extra grippy bits of surface lie. It's been dry the whole weekend. They've got 15 minutes now to get their eye in. Normally warm-up's a bit of a poison chalice, isn't it? Like, only bad things happen. But this is super important. I'd be going out as a pro, personally, getting a feel of the car and getting my am in for the whole thing. See Ferguson with a snap of oversteer there. It was either a downshift or just trailing the brake in too much. But you can see how tentative John looks in his arms already. And that's because you've been used to a plethora of grip, and then suddenly Mother Nature has taken up from you.
Now, we know it's going to be busy around here because, A, it's not the widest of tracks, and GT3, GT4 cars are pretty wide beasts. We know it's going to be busy because there are lots of cars in the race. But you throw the rain in, that's going to reduce the pace at which GT3 can go. Does it make life even more leery because, if you like, GT3 and GT4 are going to be more bunched rather than being able to separate?
Definitely the low speed where the aero drops off. GT3 has the massive advantage. Look at the rear wing on that Mercedes of Ian Loggy, but GT4 mechanical grip wise is very similar at like Britain Chicane where we're looking here, but also the lines the car take. In the dry, the GT3, GT4 take the same dry line, but in the wet, you're kind of looking for the grip, so it's not obvious potentially what that GT4 car is doing in front of you if you're in that GT3 coming up to lap. So I think the incident rate percentage goes through the roof. I would not want to be an insurance company here today looking after any of these clients.
Now, this warm-up session, which doesn't affect the grid, 15 minutes in duration. Joe mentioned a moment ago about being the pro going out first and making sure all is well with the car. Just to make the point that in GT3 you have Pro-Am and you have Silver Am. It is effectively a Pro-Am championship, although in many cases, calling some of the drivers AMs is rather unfair. In GT4, though, there is the silver cut. You have an extra pit stop penalty, if you like, because your two silvers are one of those combinations. Jack Brown and Zach Meek in number 90 McLaren. You've just seen go up the escape road at Hislops, and it was Jack Brown behind the wheel. But ostensibly, what we have is an absolutely top-line Pro-Am championship. Now, there are more and more cars coming down the pit lane. And swinging towards the SRO Motorsport pit, number 14, the BMW Michael Johnston. GT4 champion last year brings the car in. Dan Harper, late call, but back into the championship as the pro in number 14. The sister car, number 22, goes through. Carl Cavers sharing with Lewis Plato. And I tell you what, the more spray that's being kicked up, the more gloomy, the more horrible it looks. It's a bit sort of Spa 24 hours now, isn't it? Headlights piercing the gloom.
Yeah, there's not much wind around either, it seems. The spray is hanging in the air, so you're kind of driving through a cloud from the car in front of that, and it really starts to go. You saw some of the cars pitting at the end of the first lap. That's probably just getting their procedure in place for the pit stop. Teams that were maybe on the front foot and did that procedure earlier on in the weekend are now able to use this warm-up fully for wet setup. So actually I think that's going to pay dividends to the teams that have done their sort of groundwork, their boring stuff early on. See the 10 car there of Josh Rowledge getting down under the brakes. You see them braking in the middle of the track, trying to stay off the rubbery, oily bit that gets used 99% of the time in the dry. As we see the Johnston car leave again, says he stayed on board. It looks like Harper's helmet to me though, so might have done a driver change. See the car squirming all the way onto the track there, and the pit limit ends quite early, so you can actually do the whole exit of the pit lane as fast as you can, which in the dry is just flat, but in the wet will be far from it.
Those of you with your anoraks on will have noticed that the number 14 GT3 BMW has yellow headlights, which is really the GT4 thing, rather than white headlights, as GT3 cars should, just to differentiate and also let people in their mirrors know what's approaching behind. So whether that's going to be discussed by race control, we will see in due course. Marcus Clutton, who is definitely a pro, has gone fastest in this soggy session, a 1:48.3. Matt Topham is up to second. Well, it won't be Matt Topham, will it? It'll be Josh Rowledge, because we saw Matt Topham standing watching earlier on. And Giacomo Petrobelli coming here for the first time in well over 10 years, third fastest. John Ferguson is fourth quickest. Times are shuffling all the while now as more and more people break the beam, both in GT3 and GT4. You don't have to go out in this session. It doesn't, unless you get a penalty, for example, in this, it doesn't affect the grid, but what it does give you is valuable mileage in the wet, which they haven't had, well, they did in testing earlier on in the week potentially, but in terms of the race meeting part of the last few days, practice and qualifying on Saturday was dry, and now race day wet, so they could do with some data, and for the AMs, just a lap or two for confidence.
Yeah, just to get your eye in, the car will feel completely different. The teams will have a base wetline setup that they would have put on these cars, but they won't be able to hone it in. So in 15 minutes, they're not probably going to do any setup work, but the drivers will be collating all their feedback on the car, what they want different, and then they can go in between warm-up and race one and make whatever changes they need. See Marcus Clutton going purple. In qualifying, we were seeing 132s. We're down in the 148, so 16 seconds. I'd expect it to be more like 11 to 12 seconds off. So drivers still getting the ride. You hear the McLaren hit the traction control over the crest out of Druids there. Nice clear lap. Yeah, it looks like Marcus is probably going to get into the 46s. But yeah, this is where the disparity in confidence and no confidence really hits home. But Marcus is going to pit, I think, probably to get his teammate Morgan Tilbrook in to give him the feeling before he gets in the car.
And he came in very rapidly indeed, sort of proper practice pit stop start. Number 78 there, the Alex Martin Sandy Mitchell Lamborghini, but went so well in Sandy Mitchell's hands. Alex Martin, new to British GT, but he's not an inexperienced driver. We've seen him in the British Touring Car Championship, we've seen him in Carrera Cup, and I think as he works with Sandy Mitchell, who we know is top dollar as a Lamborghini factory driver, he will get better and better and better as the season wears on. There on track is number 10 then. That's the Blackthorn Matt Topham, Josh Rowledge, Aston Martin, making its way down towards Island Bend. Matt Topham looked after by very experienced Charlie Hollings these days, and it is Matt being shown as in the car still, heading up towards that grippier right at Shell Oil's corner.
Yeah, I think it still is Josh, because they haven't boxed, and like you said, Matt was in the pit lane early. You can see remnants of the off Topham had, the bumper being all black, not being liveried up to match the rest of that livery, which is pretty striking from the Blackthorn team. Both cars looking the same. New team to British GT, as we see Tilbrook getting pushed back. I would assume he's taken over from Clutton. Messy pit lane here at Oulton, 36 cars, not a lot of real estate space. So yeah, I think the race is going to be lively in the pit lane and on track. Josh's helmet in the car there, fluorescent yellow, made a big step up from the Artura GT4 last year, has done really well in limited testing. And this goes to the Evo Aston Martins, the only Evo one on the grid at the moment. All the other Aston Martins are the old spec. Easiest way to see the change is a higher rear wing, bigger, more aggressive front grille, allowing for better aerodynamic grip along the whole lap here at Oulton Park. So I don't think there's much difference between lap time wise between the Evo and the old car that we're looking at here, but I think the drivability of the Evo has been worked on really well by ProDrive and AMR. So I think in the wet, I think the Evo is actually going to shine a little bit more than maybe we saw on qualifying on Saturday. So it'll be interesting to see the differences just between the two Aston Martins.
Josh Rowledge then confirmed behind the wheel of that car, improving on that lap, second fastest, but 2 seconds down on Marcus Clutton. Now there, number 8, with, as you can see, different coloured bodywork, didn't qualify for either race because Richard Neary went off at Druids in Q1, and off the road there is Morgan Tilbrook's car. Now Marcus Clutton is shown behind the wheel of it coming out of Cascades, but we'd seen it picked and we expected Morgan Tilbrook to be on board. Let's just go back to the Mercedes quickly. So Richard Neary had an off at Druids, the front of the car was damaged, it couldn't therefore do Q1 nor Q2 and will be at the back of the GT3 grid for both races. 77 McLaren has had a loop coming out of Cascades, and with all due deference, you wouldn't expect that to be Marcus Clutton.
No, I would still stick with Morgan as my first point. That would be his outlap first round Cascade, see the grass and the turf. Jonathan Palmer won't be particularly happy that's on the tarmac, not on his off-track part of it. And he did really well to get it off there because it looked like it was bogged down. You could actually, the rear wheels spinning around, just got enough traction to get out of there and get on his merry way. But that will be a rude awakening to an Easter Monday if that was Morgan Tilbrook, like I suggested. Another driver change this time in the paddock GT4 Artura. Get a good illustration of what they're doing. Team are going to leave the tyres on and just check pressures, driver change, and then get ready to go.
Just on the subject of paddock motorsport, they also would have had a Mercedes AMG to go with the McLaren, but Ed McDermott had the torque tube blow itself asunder on his outlap in FP1. They spent a lot of the weekend repairing it, fired up the engine, and then the engine seized, and that was that. So that car's had to be withdrawn, and the significance in that is 2 races they will miss because it's a double header, and one of the 2 drivers in that car, Matt Cowley, of course, comes into the championship as the reigning champion, so he's on the back foot straight off.
Yeah, and obviously in British GT, what I'd call a proper scoring system where you're not allowed to drop points. Some GT championships allow a drop round, so if you do have a bit of bad luck, you're still in the hunt, but British GT doesn't allow that, so that will haunt them for the rest of the season basically, so they can't get away from that, and they already need to be wishing bad luck upon their rivals. See the Century GT4 car here of Robertson and Ravi Rammi. They've been really quick, done a lot of pre-season testing, done a lot of mileage, so some of it in the Middle East, and they haven't had as much rain out there as I think they have in our little island, but I think that car's going to be really strong in Pro-Am. We see another driver change, Ian Logie getting out on the right side, Phil Keane back on board with Ian Logie. He's tried some exotic names and he's come back to Phil, the most winningest driver, equal with Johnny Adams, so he knows British GT. Used to be teammates with Phil. We always used to sort of bemoan that we didn't have very fast names, so that's what we always put it down to, why we didn't get as many drives as some of the exotic Italians, and even the French sound quite fast sometimes. But I think Phil and Ian are outside championship rivals on pure pace, but experience and mentality. I could see them winning the championship without winning a race.
Yes.
That would be my left field punt that no one asked for.
That was the Michael Caine, Daniele Perfetti way of doing it for David Baltram's Motorbase squad many, many years ago. Well, Ian Logie and Philip Keane, certainly very experienced. John Ferguson with Raffaele Marciello, number 15, the Ram Racing BMW this year, because Raffaele has gone to BMW. Recent dad as well, so has had to leave the family to come and race over here. But Raffaele Marciello, still a star, and it's great to have him remaining in British GT. Maxi Gertz, we've not yet touched on, but he is, if you like, this year's fast foreign interloper, coming into the championship to join Kevin Say at 2Cs Motorsport.
Yeah, I bet he was happy with his qualifying in 13th, coming over to British GT out of 16 cars. I would have expected him to definitely be inside the top 6. Saw Jules Gounon really come in and just set the championship on fire from the get-go. Maxi Gertz not quite as lucky in his first attempt in British GT qualifying.
But doesn't it show, though, the level at which the likes of, you know, a Buncombe or a Keane or a Adam or a Mitchell operator, just because they're British doesn't mean they're slower than people from mainland Europe. These are the GT4 cars you can see coming up the hill. Back to GT3, where at the back of that little battle pack is 67, the Simon Orange driven McLaren with Tom Roach. Have a look in the pit lane here at just how crowded it is. Some cars being released, some cars diving in, and it's all very, very busy indeed. You would not want to be the car controller there, because you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah, you can see the Greystone, the green Mercedes just leaving there. The car controller released it and then had to put his lollipop down, but the driver had already committed to going, and then the driver had to deal with the Garage 59 car of Balfe and Small to get pushed back into them. There's choreography, but it's a clunky dance, the pit stop here, and there's no easy way of doing it. You've got to push back. You can't push back and hold and block people in, so you have to push back and go. So timing-wise for the teams to not go under that minimum pit stop time is really, really difficult, as we see Marciello now on his outlap in the 15 car. Very similar sort of liveries between those cars, but different teams. Ram running Marciello, the car in front. Century, champions from last year with Harper and Darren Lung, then following through. So yeah, you get these inter-team rivalries, same manufacturers, but they're the team you want to beat the most as we go on board with Marciello. Rear view mirror blocking a little bit of our view, but you can see him turning in down the avenue, braking slightly off the racing line into Cascades. Look at his hands constantly feeling for the grip. A little bit of throttle, trying to wind the steering off so he can accelerate harder. Marciello and Ferguson got Charlie Fagg on board as their driver coach at the moment, trying to help them. Anything he can do. Marciello's super fast, but sometimes want a local guy, a bit like a caddy and a golfer, just sometimes getting someone to give you a little bit of an insight and just trying to help you out. Marciello looks like he's pretty confident with that car. The speed he's going past other GT3 cars, that BMW, new to him this year, of course, so used to him being in a Mercedes, both front engine, but I think the turbo of the BMW must be a big adjustment for him. The natural torque, the naturally aspirated Mercedes he's used to, a nice linear delivery. Now a very fast, big turboed car will be a big, big difference in conditions like this.
But he's also, of course, getting himself as many programmes as possible. British GT, World Challenge Europe, World Endurance Championship, so GT3 BMW almost every weekend, just as he used to do in the Mercedes days. And okay, it's different teams, but he will be well versed in the car, and he knows Oulton Park now, having been here before. Sam Neary, by the way, is the fastest, 147.1, over a second clear of Morgan Tilbrook's McLaren. Confirmation it was Morgan that had the loop, but the time was done earlier on by Marcus Classen. You can see Tom Gamble has been hustling on and done an absolute best in the first sector. Number 61 Mustang there, reigning GT4 champion Eric Evans, partnered with the returning Marco Signoretti that we had 2 years ago in the championship. And the flag is imminent. It's also wet, but it's imminent because we've got less than 10 seconds to go as through the gloom they come out of Deer Leap. These conditions, certainly a good advert for why you should have the lights as much as Marshall's flags, because you can see the lights there piercing through the gloom for the Marshall's posts. Checkered flag out then. 27 turns out of Old Hall Corner, the McLaren of Mark Radcliffe and Tom Gamble. Tom Gamble doing the time. But he got caught up in traffic, so it was a great start to the lap. Sam Neary, though, has done an absolute best in the middle sector. So number 8 Mercedes, it's always a spectacular car, that. You can never guarantee what the ABBA Racing Mercedes is going to do. Both Sam and Richard are very quick drivers. Yes, they've had more than their fair share of dramas over the seasons. But when it's pointing in the right direction, when it's on the racetrack, it's a quick car. They are quick drivers, and here's more evidence. Sam Neary is going to bail rather than take the flag on the track.
Yeah, that's a shame. I wonder why, because he had a clear run to it. His first 2 sections were mega. Third looked good, but it might sound a little harsh, which is quite usual for me, but they're kind of win or bin, I feel. You know what I mean? Like we were saying, to go a bit harsher on that, they're both so aggressive. That aggression, when it sticks, pays off amazingly. When it doesn't, it's really bad, and it's almost like they're top 5 or DNF. There's no sort of middle ground, and for a championship, that's the opposite to what you really need, as we see a real cluster of cars coming into the Knickerbrook chicane. The Barwell Lamborghini here stuck behind the Stella Audi. And you can just see how much time that loses. The Audi doesn't really make it obvious if he's pushing, is he online or offline, and that would have been 2.5 seconds lost in one sequence of corners.
Sandy Mitchell is going to bring the car through to the end of the session, and worth sticking the pro out at least for 1 lap, just so he gets a feel for it, an idea of it, and can bring back some data to the team. Maxi Goetz, though, has gone to the top of the times in the 2Cs Mercedes, 146.3.
he answers the question, can he do it on a Monday night in Stoke then, doesn't he? So, everything we were saying about maybe British GT being a little bit harder than what he maybe imagined, he proves us massively wrong. Marcello also improving to go second, so the two sort of non-natives are at the top of our screens in very native conditions, basically.
And off the road again has got Morgan Tilbrook. That's down at Hislop before Knickerbrook. So he rallycrosses his way back towards terra firma and brings the car back to the pit lane. I suppose you could argue better he does it in the warm-up than in the race, but at least the car is undamaged. Right, as everybody watches on from whatever vantage point you can find, Maxi Goetz ends the session fastest ahead of Raffaele Marcello and Sam Neary. Marcus Klassen fourth from Phil Keane, and then Martin Plowman. Going well this morning, the Audi of Sasha Kakad and Hugo Cook ahead of Adam Smalley and Sean Balfe in the Duckham's livery McLaren. Tom Gamble ninth, and the brothers Buncan for Bob Neville's RJN team 10th from Tom Roach. Then Josh Rowledge, Giacomo Petrovelli doing the driving duties for Blackthorn, and Carl Cavers and Lewis Plato next ahead of the best GT4 car that's on pole for race 1, Jamie Day and Mikey Porter. Mike Price's Mercedes next from Andrew Howard's Beechdene Aston, and then back to GT4, the McLaren of Zach Meakin and Jack Brown ahead of the Mercedes of Harry George and Luca Hopkinson. Then the Mustang of Matt Nicol-Jones, the team owner, and Will Moore. Seb Morris, who's on pole for GT4 Race 2, sharing with Charles Dawson next from Rami Ramyeed and Charlie Robertson in the BMW. Then Sai Sanjay, along with Callum Davis. That car had an off in Q2 for GT4 on Saturday. Will Oulton and Mark Warren next, and then Marco Signoretti and Eric Evans are next. So that's the leading order from GT warm-up. The first race is going to be at 10:50, and it's still going to be on a damp circuit, so it promises to be a really spectacular start to the British GT Championship season. We'll see you for lights out at 10:50.